What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back with a 75th anniversary review for Billy Wilder's Ace in the Hole, which was released on June 14th, 1951. I first saw it at a revival house in LA in the late 90s when I was first getting into Billy Wilder's movies, and suffice to say, it completely floored me. But in addition to giving us a taste of Billy Wilder's talent when he was in his absolute prime, we also have a prime Kirk Douglas who gave us so many legendary performances over the years. But the character of Charles Chuck Tatum gave him a rare opportunity to really explore his darker impulses. And throughout his incredible career, Kirk Douglas never worried about being portrayed in an unsympathetic light on screen. He just wanted to play dramatically compelling characters, and the character of Tatum is irresistible.
Get yourself involved in a trunk murder. How about it, Mr. Everish? I could do wonders with your dismembered body.
Oh, Mr. Tatum.
The movie is simply littered with one vicious scene after another, making it a strong contender for Billy Wilder's most cynical movie, which is saying something given some of the other films in his extraordinary filmography. I mean, just look at this poster. This is not a soft and fuzzy romantic comedy. Ace in the Hole is a relentlessly aggressive movie and well worth owning on Blu-ray, which I have right here thanks to the fine folks at Criterion.
Beneath this sinister mountain, a man is buried alive, trapped by a cave-in. And from every part of a shocked and anxious nation, the crowds stream to watch the desperate rescue crews fighting against time, battering their way to the barrier of solid rock, while far below, a daring reporter makes his way into the treacherous, crumbling tunnel that is the only lifeline between the helpless victim and the outside world.
And if you'll indulge me for a second or two, I'd like to take this moment to boast and brag that I recently completed my journey of watching every single movie in Billy Wilder's filmography. There were 7 or 8 movies that I'd already seen many times over, and I just kept rewatching those movies, but I thought I owed it to Billy Wilder to gain an appreciation for the full ebb and flow of his entire filmmaking career, one that spans from the early 30s up through the early 80s, and even then, even though he stopped making movies, he was still working the talk show circuit and working on books and that sort of thing. But of all of his movies, my personal favorites remain Sunset Boulevard, Ace in the Hole, and Double Indemnity. But I did enjoy making a few fresh discoveries, like Witness for the Prosecution, which I absolutely loved, and I'll be getting to in my top 10 list at the end of this video. But speaking of Sunset Boulevard, for all you fanatics out there, last year I created a 75th anniversary review for that movie as well, which I'll include in the link below. But as many of you already know, Sunset Boulevard was both a commercial and critical success, an instant classic which opened the door to making a movie as savage as Ace in the Hole in the first place, a movie which in hindsight was the courageous choice, but not necessarily the most appealing on a commercial level.
Maybe we'll have a couple of drinks. Maybe you'll even take me out for a big evening, huh?
Why don't you wash that platinum out of your hair?
But with Ace in the Hole, we have one of those classic scenarios where a movie is rejected by many at the time of its release. However, since then, a lot of filmmakers and a lot of film historians have embraced the movie as one of Wilder's best efforts. For my money, I'm always a fan of seeing a filmmaker use a big hit as leverage to take a big creative risk. And after Sunset Boulevard, Billy Wilder saw his opportunity and he just went for it. Or as he used to say, when you've got them by the throat, don't let them go. But I should add that with Ace in the Hole, this was Billy Wilder's first time at bat as the producer, in addition to being the director and the co-writer, but not the co-writer with his traditional writing partner, Charles Brackett. In the 1940s, Charles Brackett and Billy Wilder, they were the dream team, co-writing one classic movie after another. But on Sunset Boulevard, Billy Wilder and Charles Brackett had massive creative differences and decided to go their separate ways. But it would take a couple of years before Billy Wilder would find yet another regular writing partner in the form of I.A.L. Diamond, with whom he would later write some of the best movies of his later period. In any case, before Ace in the Hole was even released, there was already trouble. Paramount changed the name of the movie to The Big Carnival without Wilder's permission. The last-minute switch didn't help at all, and the movie ended up being a commercial disappointment, although Wilder claims it was much more popular in Europe. But it would take decades before the proper title of the movie would eventually get restored, and the relationship went from bad to worse when on his next movie, Stalag 17, which was a success for Paramount. Paramount argued Billy Wilder did not deserve his profit participation on that movie because he had lost money on Ace in the Hole. Yet another movie where he had profit participation, but this is classic Hollywood accounting. They truly have the morals of a gangster.
Phony, below the belt journalism, that's what it is.
Not below the belt, right in the gut, Mr. Boot.
But if you've not seen the movie, you might be asking yourself at this point, what was it about this story that made it so tough to swallow in 1951, and yet one of Billy Wilder's most enduringly popular movies 75 years later? The short version of the story is as follows, and this is very spoiler-light territory, but this is basically just the premise. Kirk Douglas plays an unscrupulous reporter who's been fired from several major newspapers and is now hoping to rebuild his reputation working for a small paper in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He hates it, but he knows that if he can just find a hot story, he'll be able to stretch it out and exploit it better than anyone anyone and land a big job back in a place like New York. But after a year of bad food and being deprived of his beloved New York Yankees,
No garlic pickles. No Lindy's. No Madison Square Garden. No Yogi Berra.
the story that he's been looking for finally drops right in his lap. It's a story about a fellow who went digging for old Indian relics in a cave and got trapped in a cave-in. Maybe he'll survive until they can dig him out, maybe he won't. But Douglas's character does everything in his power to turn the situation into a media frenzy. It's a crisis where he has exclusive access to the story, one that he plans on prolonging just long enough to put him back on top of his profession.
If I just had 1 week of this... Oh, brother.
You're kidding, Chuck. You don't really wish for anything like that.
I'm not wishing for anything. I don't make things happen. All I do is write about them.
And as you can probably imagine, his scheme doesn't go exactly according to plan. However, along the way, Billy Wilder gives us an unforgettable storytelling experience. And it's not just a movie that's condemning or criticizing cutthroat reporters. It basically takes aim at every single character in the story, because it doesn't take long before everybody realizes, whoa, there is money to be made off this situation. Whether you're selling hot dogs to people in the parking lot who just want to get a whiff of crisis, or a whiff of human misery, or the people running the hotels, or the corrupt local law enforcement. And there are a few noble people with a little bit of character that Kirk Douglas has some friction with along the way, but they're very rare. But I think in the end, what keeps me coming back to this movie, it might be the most quotable movie of Billy Wilder's career. And there are great lines in Double Indemnity, and there are great lines in Sunset Boulevard, and there are great lines in Some Like It Hot, and The Apartment, and all of his best movies. But goddamn, when I was going through and assembling the clips for this video, it's like, oh, I got to find a place for that clip. Oh, I've got to find a place for that clip. It is ridiculous. For people who enjoy the power of the written word, Ace in the Hole is screaming your name. But
What about the 200?
I was coming to that. Mr. Boot, I'm a $250 a week newspaper man. I can be had for 50.
Why are you so good to me?
But let's slow down for a bit and talk a little bit about Billy Wilder himself. Then we'll get into the story, the cast, a few more highlights, and then I'll do my top 10 list of Billy Wilder's movies. So Billy Wilder is one of those rare directors whose career is so massive and so impressive, it's tough to discuss his career unless you break it down into really small, bite-sized chunks. So I'm going to try to stay focused on the information that's relevant to this movie, but he's one of those directors like Alfred Hitchcock or Howard Hawks who just has a huge body of work, and all those directors are included in the club of filmmakers where I've seen every single film that they ever directed. And there are a couple other directors out there like Orson Welles and people like that, but there's only maybe like 10, 15, 20 directors where I'm determined to watch every single film that they ever created or collect their screenplays. I mean, I got the screenplays for Sunset Boulevard and Double Indemnity right here. If you want to learn about the art of writing screenplays that are not based on a toy from 50 years ago, check out some of the screenplays by Billy Wilder. But what's interesting about the beginning of his career in relation to this movie, he did start off as a journalist before he became a filmmaker. And according to what I've read, and this could be myth-making or legend, who knows, but Billy Wilder was a superb dancer. And from what I've read, he used his superb dancing skills to pose as a gigolo in order to get access to better stories as a journalist. And that's one of the things that just continues to impress me about all these legendary figures from like the 20s and 30s, is how they would be like soldiers and novelists and journalists and filmmakers. They would wear a lot of hats throughout their careers. But Billy Wilder was Jewish, and if you're living in Germany in the early 1930s, obviously the situation rapidly became quite dangerous. So he started migrating west, and when he got to France, he got his opportunity to co-direct his first feature film, Bad Seed, which I saw in preparation for this video. And I'm not going to tell everybody that Bad Seed's the greatest movie they'd ever made, but if you're interested in his career, you should absolutely see Bad Seed. It's fascinating. I love movies from the early mid-30s. But eventually he made the move to Hollywood, and it's just, he went from having so much bad luck being a Jew in Germany to having so much good luck in America. It obviously helps if you have a lot of talent and a lot of drive. But he reinvented himself as a screenwriter, working for people like Ernst Lubitsch. And you could make a case that Ernst Lubitsch, some of his best movies were thanks to the fact that Billy Wilder was on the staff. And Billy Wilder played a direct role in some of his most memorable movies, like Ninotchka, which is absolutely fucking hysterical. But by the time he was hired as a screenwriter for Ball of Fire, he was ready to start positioning himself for a directing career of his own. And apparently he spent a lot of time on the set watching Howard Hawks work, because at that time Howard Hawks was one of the most legendary directors in the business, both commercially as well as critically. He was just absolutely on fire. So Billy Wilder's like, okay, I see how this is done. And soon thereafter, Billy Wilder became a part of that first great wave of awesome writer-directors, which included people like John Huston or Preston Sturges. Not bad company to be included in. But Billy Wilder had this great line about letting other people direct his screenplays back then. He said it was a little bit like making a bed that other people could sleep in. They got to have all the fun. And luckily at this time, there were a ton of great opportunities for Billy Wilder at Paramount. Paramount was just absolutely hopping as a studio. They're cranking out about 40 movies per year. And they kept Billy Wilder under contract for years, where he rapidly became one of the greatest success stories of any European talent that migrated to Hollywood. And he was not alone at that time. And there were a lot of European immigrants in the 1920s and the 1930s who basically turned like the golden age of Hollywood into that stellar period that it became. And when discussing those great European success stories in Hollywood, obviously you got to talk about people like Charlie Chaplin or Ernst Lubitsch, William Wyler, Michael Curtiz, Fritz Lang. It's funny, Fritz Lang was so huge in Germany in the 20s and early 30s. And while he made excellent movies in Hollywood in the late 30s and basically up through like the late 50s, I love Fritz Lang's Hollywood career, but he never quite achieved the heights of both critical and commercial acclaim that Billy Wilder was able to achieve. And obviously, you got to include Alfred Hitchcock in the mix as one of the great European directors who migrated over to Hollywood. But that clash of Hollywood commercial sensibilities and European art house sensibilities coming together, I think that's one of the main reasons why the golden age of Hollywood was as special as it was. And I think one of the main reasons that Billy Wilder thrived at this time is that he enjoyed studio filmmaking. He liked how if you're working on a soundstage, you have total control over every aspect of the production. Like famously on The 7-Year Itch, which he would direct in the late 50s, when they're trying to get that classic upskirt shot of Marilyn Monroe, they tried it on the streets of Manhattan and it didn't quite work, and a bunch of journalists showed up and just the whole situation went crazy. The shot that's in the movie is the shot that they were able to achieve on a soundstage. And let me pause for a moment to plug a short film that I made with Bill Tech and Bill Scurry back in 2019, The Movies That Define New York, when we visited the location in Manhattan where they made the first attempt at the famous upskirt sequence. Here, who's going to do the pose, you or I? Isn't it delicious? Isn't it delicious? But another key to his success was that Billy Wilder was always trying to learn from the best. And Ernst Lubitsch, when it came to sparkling comedies of manners, sophisticated sexual comedies of manners, he still is probably the best director ever to do it in Hollywood. And even though Billy Wilder's sensibilities and Lubitsch's sensibilities were quite different, Billy Wilder for years kept a sign over his desk that just said, "How would Lubitsch do it?" And I think it's excellent advice, and it shows a certain level of humility to the giants that came before him. But I think the more important question is, how would Billy Wilder do it? Because I don't think Ernst Lubitsch could have ever made a movie quite like Ace in the Hole. Only Wilder knew how to tell stories precisely like Billy Wilder. In particular with this movie, perhaps the purest expression of just his aggressive, biting side. He was a true cynic. But I guess his cynical side is just one side of him, because in interviews, he is so warm and he's so hilarious and he has all these great anecdotes and he has all these great one-liners about working with certain people. And the people that worked with him loved him. He worked over and over and over again with Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau, William Holden. And what was great for me as a young cinephile in the late 90s when I was first going movie crazy is that Billy Wilder was still around. He was still making public appearances, still doing interviews. He was one of the last connections we had to Hollywood's great golden age, because all the other directors that I loved and adored, like John Ford and people like that, they were all long gone. But Billy Wilder, he just kept on cranking along. But here in 2026, what keeps me coming back to Billy Wilder's movies and what makes them so endlessly rewatchable is the writing. It's funny, when I'm watching a Hitchcock movie and looking for clips, because I'm doing a 75th anniversary review for Strangers on a Train as well, but when I'm going through Hitchcock's movies, I look for those beautiful shots, like the amazing composition and the incredible visual technique. But when I'm looking for clips from Billy Wilder, I'm like, oh my God, I need that line. Oh my God, I need that line. And his movies did look great. But Hitchcock obviously was working on another level when it came to the art of visual storytelling. So different directors bring different things to the table. And Billy Wilder, he just had an ear for dialogue and, more importantly, an ability to write great dialogue and to find incredible collaborators with whom he could tell these stories. So let's shift gears now and talk about the script and the inspiration for the story back when it was just called The Human Interest Story.
Human interest. You pick up the paper, you read about 84 men or 284. Or 1,000,000 men, like in the Chinese famine. You read it, but it doesn't stay with you. One man's different. You want to know all about him. That's human interest.
Now, as I mentioned before, Sunset Boulevard would be the last time that Billy Wilder and Charles Brackett would find an opportunity to work together. So in this movie, he brought in Lesser Samuels, as well as Walter Newman. And as far as what the inspiration for the story might have been, here's what I read over on Wikipedia. The film's plot has similarities with two real-life events that ended in tragedy. The first involved W. Floyd Collins, who in 1925 was trapped inside Sand Cave, Kentucky, following a landslide. The Louisville Courier-Journal jumped on the story by dispatching reporter William Burke Miller to the scene. Miller's enterprising coverage turned the tragic episode into a national event and earned him a Pulitzer Prize.
Say, what'd you take at that school of journalism? Advertising?
Maybe I did hear about it.
And maybe you heard that a reporter on the Louisville paper crawled in for the story and came out with a Pulitzer Prize.
Collins is cited in the film as an example of a cave-in victim who becomes a media sensation. The second event took place in April 1949. 3-year-old Kathy Fiscus of San Marino, California, fell into an abandoned well, and during a rescue operation that lasted several days, thousands of people arrived to watch the action unfold. In both cases, the victims died before they were rescued. And just to give you the full story of the screenplay, I also read this over on Wikipedia. After the film's release, screenwriter Victor Desney sued Wilder for plagiarism because he had contacted Wilder's secretary Rosella Stewart to propose a film based on the story of Floyd Collins in November of 1949. Wilder's attorneys responded that not only did an oral plot summary not constitute a formal story submission, but the Collins case was historical in nature and as such was not protected by copyright laws. In December of 1953, Judge Stanley Mosk ruled in favor of Wilder and Paramount. Desney appealed, and in August of 1956, the Supreme Court of California ruled that his oral submission had been legitimate. Wilder's attorneys settled that same month, paying Desney $14,350, equivalent to $170,000 in 2025. So not chump change, especially when you're talking about a movie that lost money. But as far as the crew is concerned, Billy Wilder surrounded himself with some absolute pros, including composer Hugo Friedhofer, who wrote an incredible score, but more importantly, Charles Lang as the cinematographer. And Charles Lang's one of those DPs back in the day where it's like he was the DP on so many movies, and you go down the list and you're like, oh my God, oh my God. Oh my God. But let's just say, if you're shooting outdoors, once again, Billy Wilder was a studio director. He liked shooting on sound stages, but with this movie, a lot of times they were outdoors. They also constructed a replica on a soundstage as well. But one of the reasons this movie looks so different from the rest of Billy Wilder's career is that they're out in the desert shooting on this incredible location, and Charles Lang obviously played a huge role in capturing all that majestic scenery. And speaking of Charles Lang and his extraordinary cinematography, this is a rare Billy Wilder movie where there are certain shots that are burned into my memory even more so than the extraordinary screenplay. Like toward the end of the movie, when the media circus has died down and it's ended in tragedy and everybody's moving on, there's a beautiful shot of what the desert looks like after everybody's departed. Because leading up to that point, I mean, it's just like it's like an amusement park. It's like a carnival, hence the change in name to the Big Carnival by Paramount. But when you can, if you can tell your story with pictures as opposed to words, once again, this is cinema. I feel like that's a great example of telling your story with words. They could have had a great line about how all the vultures have fled or something along those lines, but instead, they just show us an iconic image. And then, of course, we have the final shot of this movie, which has been imitated. One of the biggest admirers of this movie is director Spike Lee, and he has like either 10 or 20-minute little featurette on this Blu-ray just singing the praises of this movie. And sometimes he'll say it's his second favorite movie, but the reality is, if you watch Malcolm X, there's a direct homage to the final shot at the end of this movie when Kirk Douglas collapses right into frame. It's one of the most iconic shots of the 1950s by far, where it's probably why the movie lost money, and that it has a bleak, bitter, cynical ending, but it's also one of the reasons why people remember this movie 75 years later. I mean, if you want to send people out of the theater like, oh my God, like what did we just watch? Having your hero collapse into frame, or I shouldn't say hero, having your protagonist collapse into the camera, that's one way to send the audience out scratching their heads, wondering what the hell they just experienced. But perhaps I procrastinated enough. Let's talk about the astonishing cast that brought this amazing screenplay to life. Because even if you have a great screenplay, if you don't have equally talented actors, well, then your screenplay is never going to completely, totally reach its full potential. But Jan Sterling, she's great in this. Robert Arthur, he's really good as the photographer who kind of gets a little taste of success and is like, oh, this total ruthless scumbag. I'm gonna follow him wherever he goes, and maybe I'll get the rub, as they say. I'll get a piece of the action. Gene Evans, who worked with Samuel Fuller many times, he's in here as a deputy sheriff. Ray Teal is positively evil as Sheriff Guts Kretzer. I mean, the way the character's introduced. I mean, I keep going back to like how Billy Wilder had such a way with words, but there are some great shots in this, because when we first see this character, he is feeding a rattlesnake at the center of his table. At the beginning of the movie, when Kirk Douglas is getting his assignment for the day, he's sent to cover a story about bashing in the heads of thousands of rattlesnakes in the underbrush, and he's having all these mad ambitions, or these kind of like these fever dreams about what he would do with the story if some of those rattlesnakes would get loose in Albuquerque, and how he could kind of stretch it out, as people start hunting them down one at a time. In any case, so when we're introduced to the sheriff, he's feeding one of these rattlesnakes, and it just sums up without a word of dialogue who this guy is, and how he's going to be kind of lured over to Chuck Tatum's side as one of his co-conspirators. One of my favorite actors in this movie is Porter Hall, who plays Jacob Q. Boot, the man who gives Chuck Tatum an opportunity to rebuild his career on his newspaper. And he's such, how can I describe this?
As for drinking, do you drink a lot?
Not a lot, just frequently.
We have a shop rule here. No liquor on the premises.
How about smoking?
Of course.
He's such an interesting, nonchalant character who almost comes across like an absent-minded professor at times, or like he's barely paying attention. But as we learn over the course of the movie, he's also one of the few men in this movie with principles and a sense of honor and a sense of integrity. But he's also hilarious, because at one point he makes a reference to the fact that Chuck Tatum got fired from one paper for hooking up with the wife of his employer. And he says something like, well, like, my wife is a grandmother of 7. If you flirt with her, she'll be very flattered. But the way he just says it with no emotion, it just makes me howl.
Now, about that publisher's wife, I think you should know Mrs. Boot is a grandmother 3 times. If you want to start something with her, she'd be very flattered.
But he's also a very careful, diligent guy. And as Chuck Tatum points out, he's a man who wears both suspenders and a belt. And Chuck Tatum, he says, well, I've lied to people who wear suspenders and I've lied to people who wear a belt, but I would never lie to a person who wears both suspenders and a belt. But toward the end of the movie, as this media circus starts to come totally unraveled and totally unglued due to the tragedy that unfolds, well, then it's Jacob Q. Boot who's there to remind Chuck Tatum of what might have been if he had any sense of journalistic integrity of any kind.
Look, I've waited a long time for my turn at bat. Now that they've pitched me a fat one, I'm gonna smack it right out of the ballpark.
But in the end, this is the Kirk Douglas show, and it's a strong contender for my favorite performance by Kirk Douglas, even though he gave us so many extraordinary performances across the years, like The Strange Love of Martha Ivers, his screen debut. I saw that in the theater out in L.A. Out of the Past is incredible. I'm just going to do a quick scan. A Letter to 3 Wives, fucking fantastic. Ace in the Hole, yeah. Obviously, I'm a big fan of that. The Big Sky, The Bad and the Beautiful. Goddamn, if you want to see him playing an unscrupulous filmmaker as opposed to an unscrupulous journalist, check out Vincent Minnelli's The Bad and the Beautiful. What else? 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. A little Disney-fied, but, well, we're seeing Ulysses, one of my favorite Greek mythology movies ever made. I mean, we're only at 1954, and I'm still scrolling through. Lust for Life, where he played Vincent Van Gogh, a personal favorite by Tony Stella. Gunfight at the OK Corral, like, is there a better movie to watch on Sunday afternoon with your dad if you just want to watch an old-fashioned Western? Paths of Glory, one of the best movies that Stanley Kubrick ever made. The Vikings, a completely, totally epic, savage Viking movie. I mean, it's just embarrassing how many good movies he made. Spartacus. I mean, I'm going to cut myself off now that we're getting into the 1960s, but you get the point. He was just so goddamn talented, but also had the good taste to work with great writers and great directors, which is how he nurtured and cultivated this extraordinary career. But this movie, it's just like, if you're watching the movie looking for interesting lines or clips, you almost have to like take your hand away from the computer and stop yourself, because every single scene is just like one great line after another.
And we sat down to a little poker game and you started bothering me right in the middle of a hand.
What'd you have? Pair of deuces? This is better. Here we've got an ace in the hole.
Or later in the movie when he offers the very cynical observation, it's a good story today, tomorrow they'll wrap a fish in it. It sums up the entire sleazy profession in just one legendary line. Or in a line that's eerily prophetic about the internet and the age of social media, bad news sells best, because good news is no news. Look at channels devoted to movies where they're just singing the praises of movies that they like versus channels where they're constantly just shitting all over movies from a great height about how much they suck. In general, not always, but in general, the channels that are devoted to calling out a movie's shortcoming tend to do very, very well. And so there are a lot of Chuck Tatums out there making a fast buck.
Because before I ever worked on a paper, I sold them on a street corner. And you know the first thing I found out? Bad news sells best. Because good news is no news.
And I'm not even saying they're wrong about those movies, but it just shows how the more things change, the more they stay the same. And I feel like there's so much about Ace in the Hole, which is perfectly representative of 2026, much like Sidney Lumet's Network, which came out in 1976. And I'll also be doing a 50th anniversary review for that amazing movie later this year. But it's tough to deliver great lines and have great scenes if you don't have a great dance partner. So let's talk about Jan Sterling, who plays Lorraine Minosa, the wife of Leo Minosa, played by Richard Benedict, who's trapped up in that cave. And it's so horrifying and pitiful seeing how Chuck moves in and takes advantage of this couple, because Lorraine, her bags are packed, she's ready to leave. Leo has no idea. Leo thinks that they're still madly in love and running a little hotel and gas station, that sort of thing. But while he's up there trapped and thinking that Chuck's his best friend and he keeps bringing him cigars and singing songs with him and that sort of thing, and talking about how, like, Chuck's his only pal, that's why he can talk to him, and can't believe he's actually going to have his picture in the newspaper.
And I'm going to write a story. They want to know all about you. They'll be pulling for you.
How do you like that? Me in the paper.
Let's take another one, Leo.
Well, let me wipe my face first.
Hold it.
And that accent he uses, it's like that classic lovable kind of blue-collar accent where all of his R's are soft and that sort of thing. But Jan Sterling, or Lorraine, she's got, let's just say, a bigger ambition than running a gas station in the middle of the desert. And the moment her husband's trapped in a cave and she realizes, this is my moment, this is it, I can be hundreds of miles away before he even realizes that I'm gone. But as Kirk Douglas points out, when you dyed your hair, you must have dyed your brains, because he knows that this is about to turn into like an amusement park, and she's going to sell a lot of gas and a lot of hot dogs and a lot of Coca-Cola out of that roadside store. And that the opportunity of a lifetime has come for her, and that she's going to make more money in a week than she's seen in her entire life. But I like how initially she's attracted to him, and she's kind of being seduced by him, and she's starting to get a little greed as well. But slowly she starts to realize just how much of a savage son of a bitch he can be. Like, she has that immortal line,
I met a lot of hard-boiled eggs in my life. But you're 20 minutes.
the sexual tension between them goes to some very strange and dark places, because initially when she starts kind of giving him the big eye, he smacks her around a little bit and basically tells her, keep the tears flowing and keep the wedding ring on your hand and keep flipping burgers, because we've got the opportunity of a lifetime on our hands. But slowly over the course of the movie, we start to realize that she's a bit of a hard-boiled egg in her own right. And there's this great line that was given to Billy Wilder by Audrey Young, who's his wife.
They're having a rosary at that little church this evening. I want you to be there.
I don't go to church. Kneeling bags my nylons.
What's fascinating about the story is how the tone shifts over the course of the journey. Initially, it is a biting, cynical movie that is hilarious and very enjoyable. But in the latter part of the movie, you're like, ooh, these are some pretty depraved individuals who will stop at nothing. And it's interesting seeing how Chuck's, his discipline starts to fall apart as he gets another taste of success. Like, initially, all he needs is a couple chairs to sleep on, and he doesn't need any booze, he doesn't need any women. He's just work, work, work. He's manipulating the doctors, he's manipulating the engineers, he's manipulating law enforcement, doing everything that he can to keep this story going for as long as possible. But as he starts to drink again, and he starts to kind of sleep in a plush bed and starts fooling around Lorraine a little bit, you know that trouble's on its way, especially as the hero of the hour, the hero of the story starts to fail, and they realize this. Basically, without getting too much into the plot, they decided to hammer in through the top to save him, as opposed to just reinforcing the walls and saving him quickly, because it would, the story would be over if they saved him quickly. But after days and days of being trapped under all these rocks and breathing in all this dust, it looks like Leo's probably going to die of pneumonia. And that's when Chuck starts getting torn impulses. He still has the greed, he still has the ambition, he still craves success, but he also wants to make sure that Leo survives to tell the tale. Because if he ends up dying as a result of Chuck's machinations, well, then this whole grand scheme is going to blow up in his face.
He'll never reach me by tomorrow morning.
You'll be out of here in 12 hours. Hang on.
And as he starts to succumb to the physical temptation of Lorraine, that relationship gets even more disturbing, like when he's grabbing her by her hair and saying that if she comes to New York to see him, she'll have to wash the platinum out. He ends up getting a pair of scissors in the belly as a thank you for all the kindness that he extends to her over the course of the movie. But it's incredible to see the kind of the boom and bust cycle of this media circus, where early on, all these journalists want to get access to the story, but due to the arrangement with the corrupt local law enforcement, only Chuck has access to the story. So he's basically getting a little revenge, getting a little payback to all these journalists who have not always treated him all that well. But to be fair, Chuck doesn't treat him all that well either. but he's got editors and publishers eating out of his hand, making him all these juicy offers if he'll just give them exclusive access to the story, and he wants to come back to their paper and be paid like $1,000 a day. However, once the plan falls on its face and Leo sadly passes away, it's incredible to see just how quickly this feeding frenzy of sharks turns on Chuck and just devours him. So he goes from being this guy at the beginning of the movie where the only way he can be transported to a possible job interview is to have the tow truck drag his car to the interview as they take the car away. And now he's right back where he started. And the end of this movie brings the entire story full circle in such satisfying fashion, like a snake eating its own tail. Because early on in the movie, he's basically making this value proposition where he says, how would you like to make $200 a day for free? Because I'm a $250 a day man. You can have me for $50. And he keeps lowering his offer. I'll take 45. I'll take 40.
And I pay $60 a week in this shop.
I'll take it.
But at the end of the movie, with his reputation in tatters and everybody turning on him, he has his immortal line, how'd you like to make yourself $1,000 a day, Mr. Boot? I'm a $1,000 a day newspaper man. You can have me for nothing. Boom. Falls into close-up.
How'd you like to make yourself $1,000 a day, Mr. Boot? I'm a $1,000 a day newspaper man. You can have me for nothing.
And that is a Hall of Fame ending to a movie. And I feel like if you can start a movie strong and end a movie strong, people will forgive a lot in the middle. Luckily with this movie, it's pretty much all good from start to finish. But you really have to send people out of the theater with an iconic moment, an iconic line. And here we have an iconic line and an iconic shot all in one. It might be the most satisfying ending to any of Billy Wilder's movies, although the end of Sunset Boulevard is pretty tough to beat. When you're talking about the career of Billy Wilder, there are a lot of good movies to choose from. So perhaps now's as good a time as any to transition into my official top 10 list for Billy Wilder, because I've always had a top 10 list. I just hadn't seen all of his features. But now that I've seen all of his features, I feel like my top 10 list has a little bit more validity. But when I first started getting prepared for this video, about 2/3 of Billy Wilder's career was one big giant blind spot for me. As I mentioned before, I'd seen like the same 7 or 8 movies over and over and over again, so I felt like I was a Billy Wilder fan. But now I can officially say what is my top 10. And as far as honorable mentions go, there weren't as many honorable mentions competing for the top 10 spots as I hoped, although there was a fresh discovery that did manage to crack the top 10. But there are a couple movies that I saw for the first time that sadly did not make the top 10, but I still want to give them some honorable mentions. So The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, definitely worth a look. Irma La Douce is way too goddamn long, and it definitely overstays its welcome, but it is a very, very sexy movie, especially earlier on in the movie. What else did I love? I enjoyed The Front Page, but as far as The Front Page is concerned, the movie from the early 30s, as well as the kind of, I guess, reimagining of it, His Girl Friday by Howard Hawks, that's always going to be my favorite version of The Front Page. Kiss Me Stupid very nearly made the top 10. Kim Novak, she's just so goddamn sexy in that movie, and Dean Martin is so goddamn funny. But my only real nagging complaint about the latter part of Billy Wilder's career is that he has one too many movies with Jack Lemmon, where for 2.5 hours he's just allowed to basically, it's like the inmates take over the asylum, because obviously they enjoyed some great early success with Some Like It Hot and The Apartment, and after that it's, all right, you're my golden ticket, do whatever you want. Feel like sometimes less is more, and Jack Lemmon's like, no, more is more, and he just goes more and more and more and more. But I like some of the Jack Lemmon movies. I just feel like they took one or two too many turns at bat together as a filmmaking team. But in the end, a top 10 list is really only a good top 10 list if there are a few movies that you have to leave out that cause you legit pain. So enough procrastinating. Here's the official top 10 list. Number 10.
It's Sabrina. Isn't it amazing? Would you have recognized her? How do you like those legs now?
David.
Aren't they something?
David. The last pair of legs that was something cost the family $25,000.
Humphrey Bogart might be a bit of an odd fit for Billy Wilder's sensibility, but William Holden and Audrey Hepburn, they were absolutely on Billy Wilder's wavelength. Number 9, 1, 2, 3. It's not consistently hilarious from start to finish, but this is one of Billy Wilder's best political satires. It's also just a chance to see James Cagney going stark raving nuts from start to finish. I first discovered it thanks to Martin Scorsese. He called a lot of attention to it in his documentary, A Personal Journey with Martin Scorsese Through American Movies. But that was just one of many incredible movies that I saw for the first time thanks to that incredible documentary. But number 8 stars my grandmother's favorite movie star, Ray Milland. And I only saw this one time, like close to 30 years ago. But The Lost Weekend packs a powerful punch. If you want to see a dark movie about the descent into alcoholism, where he's surrounded by loved ones who want the best for him, but he keeps kind of hiding bottles and running off and just, once again, it's called The Lost Weekend. He just goes on a massive bender. It goes to the dark side, and it does not disappoint. But number 7, we have the only movie that I saw for the first time in preparation for this video, but Witness for the Prosecution, starring Charles Laughton, Tyrone Power, and Marlena Dietrich. It's based on the story by Agatha Christie, and if you enjoyed it's a good old-fashioned murder mystery / courtroom drama, Charles Laughton, the way he purrs his lines of dialogue from start to finish, I don't know if there was ever a better fit for both Agatha Christie as well as Billy Wilder than Charles Laughton. And he was a damn good filmmaker in the 50s as well with his movie Night of the Hunter. But yeah, in the end, Charles Laughton is just a legendary actor, and he gives that movie his all. But my number 6, Stalag 17, starring William Holden. William Holden and Billy Wilder. I wish they'd had more opportunities to work together. They did enjoy working together, but Stalag 17 also gave Billy Wilder a chance to work with a fellow European immigrant, Otto Preminger, who started out as just a really good fucking director, but over time kind of shifted into becoming more of like a character actor. But yeah, Otto Preminger, a fascinating figure. I don't rank him quite as high as Billy Wilder, which would probably result in my receiving a severe tongue lashing courtesy of Otto Preminger, because he was famous for ripping people to shreds. But Stalag 17, it rocks. Now, my top 5, they've pretty much stayed the exact same top 5 since the late 90s when I first got into movies. But I'm just going to run through them real quickly and then share a few words. Number 5, The Apartment. Number 4, Some Like It Hot. Number 3, Ace in the Hole. Number 2, Double Indemnity. And number 1, Sunset Boulevard. If you were to give me one beer or one glass of wine or one glass of scotch, I might say, oh, let's move those around. Let's shuffle them. You can pretty much post those 5 movies in any order. And some might say, oh, well, Some Like It Hot's not on the level of the rest of them. And fair play, there are parts of that movie which are not as funny as some of the rest. But when it's funny...
The best picture this year will also be the funniest.
Good night, sugar.
Good night, honey.
Goodness, it is so sexy and so delightful. Jack Lemmon, Tony Curtis, Marilyn Monroe, they're just on fire. The Apartment, one of the loveliest love stories of that period. Shirley MacLaine. If you want to understand why she was a movie star for so many decades, The Apartment is the movie to watch. And it's probably Jack Lemmon's finest performance, where he was kept in check. He gets a little bit too over-caffeinated in his later movies, and if you give Jack Lemmon too much rope to hang himself with, he will do so each and every single time. But with The Apartment, with reuniting Billy Wilder with Fred McMurray, it's just from Double Indemnity, it's just it's a Hall of Fame movie, and justifiably won Billy Wilder many Oscars. And Double Indemnity, what can we say? It's one of the key films in the kind of the film noir era or period. Of course, when Billy Wilder is asked about it, he's like, when I made that movie, I'd never heard the term film noir. I just made the movies that I wanted to see, and I feel like that's the best attitude a filmmaker can have. Make the movies that you're personally invested in, where you're dying to see that screenplay hit the screen, a movie that you would want to see, and let all the kind of snotty or snooty film critics come up with terms like film noir after the fact. But for me, like the key film noir would be movies, basically all the best from like The Maltese Falcon up through Touch of Evil. In the 40s and in the 50s, we had a lot of great movies that fall into the category of film noir, which is more of a mood or a style or an emotion than like a genre. I feel like the hard-boiled detective genre is a genre. Film noir, you can apply film noir to a lot of different genres where it just has that feeling of pessimism, that post-war pessimism. But Double Indemnity, it's hard to watch now while not also kind of laughing, because it's so reminiscent of The Naked Gun, which was made decades later, where they're recreating some of the best scenes from it, but obviously playing it for laughs. But
my husband, you were anxious to talk to him, weren't you?
Yeah, I was, but I'm sort of getting over the idea, if you know what I mean.
There's a speed limit in this state, Mr. Neff. 45 miles an hour.
How fast was I going, officer?
I'd say around 90.
Suppose you get down off your motorcycle and give me a ticket.
And when it comes to the great heyday of film noir, Touch of Evil is my favorite, but there's some good ones out there like Kiss Me Deadly and Double Indemnity that deserve to be mentioned in the same breath. And Sunset Boulevard, it's my favorite. What can I say that I did not already say? I'm just going to post a link to that video down in the description below, and you can hear all that I want to say about Sunset Boulevard. But the big question is, which filmmakers remain where I've not seen all their movies, where I plan to see all their movies? Ernst Lubitsch, I still have a couple that are left. David Lean, I think I might have only one left. Joseph von Sternberg, who I love. I think I've only got one left there. There are a lot of Japanese filmmakers where I'm determined to see all their movies. Like Tony Stella, R.I.P., used to always encourage me to watch the movies of Hideo Gosha, where he said, that's Japan's answer to Sam Peckinpah. He is Japan's Sam Peckinpah. And I'm like, all right, that sounds cool. But I've also heard that Hideo Gosha, he's got a giant filmography, but not all of it is equally good, so it's kind of hard to get motivated to watch the entire thing. But there are certain filmmakers where I'm always like, you know what, I just need to see everything they made, like Luis Buñuel. I feel like I owe that to him. Who else? I'm looking at the posters on my wall to see if I get any ideas. Francois Truffaut, haven't seen all of his movies, but in any case, later this month I'll be doing a 75th anniversary review for Strangers on a Train. And when it comes to Hitchcock, I've already seen his entire filmography, apart from a few episodes of some of the TV shows he directed. But I'm always kind of saving those episodes for a rainy day so that I can always feel like I've still got a little bit more of Alfred Hitchcock left to watch. But I'm very fired up for that. And I'm also going to do a 50th anniversary review for The Omen in a week or two. So yeah, it's a packed month for anniversary review videos, but let me know what you think down in the comments below. Am I overpraising, underpraising? Have you seen Ace in the Hole? And if so, how many times? But yeah, I think it's just a remarkable movie. And every time I rewatch it, I'm like, oh my God, this is fucking insanely good. And it's been a pleasure and an honor and a privilege to sing its praises today. But if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing, hitting that notification bell. I would greatly appreciate it. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.